So this is the right session, whatever session you were intending to come to. We are glad that you're here. PeopleSoft Visualize, getting the big picture with pivot grids, analytics, and Kibana. So to kick things off, first off, I am Paul Taylor. I'm the President and CEO at Gideon Taylor. You're also seeing video from my co-presenter, Kristen Tutera, functional analyst here at Gideon Taylor, and she will be helping us out talking about pivot grids and sharing a client solution that we helped develop that uses pivot grids. Scott Anthony is also here. He is our VP of Business Development, and he's here to keep us honest and kind and all those other virtues that we seek to exemplify. Just a little bit about Gideon Taylor. We are now, just this year, merged with Newbury Enterprise Services. So we are now a full-service PeopleSoft consultancy. We are focused on revolutionizing PeopleSoft processes and helping you determine custom solutions and custom configurations that will get the most out of PeopleSoft. We offer a variety of services. You'll get a little bit of a look at JET eForms, our PeopleSoft-centric automation solution that allows you to develop custom electronic forms and workflow solutions inside of PeopleSoft. We do all sorts of other development around approval framework, and we also offer a full range of services, including cloud hosting, centers of excellence, project staffing, robotic process automation, new and exciting stuff. So feel free to please swing by our virtual booth and have a chat with us. If you're lucky, Scott will be there because he's the most fun of all of us to talk to. And as we move forward into the conference, we've got lots of 20-minute mini sessions set up. If you're on Windows and you're not familiar with the Windows Shift S keystroke, it'll let you take a screenshot of this and paste it someplace in a Word doc. But take a screenshot using whatever tool you like and look through. These are quick hits, low expense in time for you to get a look at a number of topics that we'll be covering, including a lot to do with isolating customizations, with automations, and with robotic process automation, which if you don't know about, you want to. Okay, we provide a wide range of services, including helping you figure out the right things to do to optimize your PeopleSoft experience. A lot of times, the ideas end up being the scarcest resource in the PeopleSoft and ERP ecosystem, coming up with what is it that you could actually use these great tools for. And we'll be talking about a number of visualization tools today. Let's talk together about how we could use those to make a difference for you and your stakeholders. A few of our clients, we across a range of industries, we do a lot of work in higher education and public sector, also in industry at large, and many others that we've worked with and have been able to find some great solutions for. So here's what we plan to cover today. And I'll mention up front that our session is built and our deck is built to be a reference guide. We're not going to talk to everything that you see on every slide. We want to give you an idea of the multiple visualization tools that you have access to in PeopleSoft, and give you an idea of who could put those to use and how you could use them. And then we'd like for you to be able to refer back to this deck to actually try out those tools. So we'll give you a look and a touch and a taste, but we won't try to dig into all of the details. Please look to download the deck and work from there. We are going to cover some visualization concepts, and then Kristen is going to walk through BYU's approval management tool that we built for them. And I will cover simplified analytics, and Kristen will also cover just how pivot grids work and where you go to set them up. I'll cover simplified analytics, Oracle JET, and Kibana, and then we'll go over some of the navigation tools that you can use in order to get to them. Hopefully by the end, at least the many terms that get thrown around will start to make sense, and you'll have an idea of what's in your tool belt as you look to get visualization value out of PeopleSoft. We're going to try hard. We have a really thick agenda here, but we're going to try hard to save some time for questions and answers at the end. If we have a break along the way, we will try to answer questions. Scott will handle questions in the Q&A as much as possible. You might have seen the question about where the deck can be downloaded. So Scott will handle that for us, and we will plow forward. So visualization concepts. Having the tools, like I said, doesn't necessarily give you the ideas of what you can do with them. But really, ERP, that acronym that we've all lived with for all this time, back in the 90s, it was coined really to refer to the fact that if you took all of your core business data and aggregated it into one system, you would be able to build visualizations based on that data that could be consumable by high-level executives to be able to look and see how trends are going, where is the money going, where are we spending our time, all sorts of different reporting options that you could get to. We've got those systems. We're all in these, ERP, the ERP concept one. Everyone uses aggregated systems, whether it be PeopleSoft or others. But I think that it's still rare for organizations to actually use the visualization and reporting abilities that PeopleSoft has to the best of their ability. So here's just this is not PeopleSoft data. I'm pulling this up to just illustrate how visualizations can help to tell a story. One of the biggest stories that we've all been dealing with for the past year and a half is the COVID-19 pandemic. It created I'm sorry, I wasn't supposed to show you that yet. Okay, so that pandemic has created all sorts of challenges to media sources to try to convey different aspects of how the pandemic has affected our lives, and to do so in a way that we can understand. So consider here, this was pulled, reports pulled last year in May, and looking at what the changes were in traffic to three different areas: retail and recreation, grocery and pharmacy, and parks. So I can show you this information here. These aren't pictures, these are numbers, and you can get some information. Looks like people did a lot less, we're doing a lot less use of retail and recreation outlets. Grocery and pharmacy, not a whole lot different, but wow, a whole lot of change in attending parks. So what did that, now, and all right, we can pull that out of those numbers. We can add some descriptive information to kind of get an idea of what places we're actually talking about here, but to really get an idea of how the pandemic affected things using a chart, makes a big difference. We can see a number of things out of a chart that we can't see from the raw numbers. We can see that something happened significantly somewhere around April 11th. We can see that there's some curves to this information. We can see that 28% actually was at the end of a trend that had trended far down and then was coming back up, maybe as people started to realize that the virus was less transmissible in outdoor environments, and as we got into spring. So we can take a lot more lessons from the information once we use visuals to tell a story. Imagine how difficult it would be to get the information from this graphic if you were just looking at the data in a chart. If you were looking at county level data of average distance traveled, and this is showing when did it first fall, the average distance traveled first fall below 2 miles, and then these different colors are different dates. So you can imagine this would really be kind of an incomprehensible table if it was just a table of data. But when you actually put it together in a visualization, you can see broad trends. You can see, oh wow, yeah, the South started traveling less later in the month. Here is kind of in the Midwest is when travel really started to drop first, and then over in the Northeast. And so visualizations help you to gather data at a glance. Here's just one more where we say, okay, do stay-at-home orders really make you stay at home? And we can see that the easy answer is yes. But each one of these dots, so these are the counties with stay-at-home orders, the less travel on this end, more travel on that end, counties without stay-at-home orders. So yes, stay-at-home orders kept people, had people traveling less. But again, all that data is hidden. Each of these little bubbles is a county. So aggregating that information was completely necessary to make any sense out of it. You've got tons of data in your PeopleSoft system, and there are tons of stories that data could tell if we pulled it together into a visualization. And so we're going to introduce you to some tools to help that to help you succeed with that goal. Before we dive in here, I'll just mention, just give a brief intro. Kristen helped to build this tool, design the tool that we're going to show you that we built with pivot grids for one of our GT eForms clients. GT eForms basically automate transaction processes, and BYU has been using them for, 18 years, 19 years. So they have many GT eForms processes, and they saw a need to be able to visualize those processes, to be able to see what, for forms that were in flight and that needed to be completed, some information about those forms, to be able to visualize, for example, when forms were stalled out or what types of forms were in overload, having a lot of transactions and needed more attention, but also to be able to actually act on those forms and do something with them. So Kristen, take it away, and just give me a whack upside the digital head when you want me to change slides.
Will do. Thanks so much. Yeah, so like Paul was saying, pivot grids are allowing you to see that information graphically. So like he was saying, BYU has a bunch of different form types. So to be able to drill in on specific form types and then further filter that information based on things like a status of a form or who last touched it, was really the goal of this. So it's going to give you a high-level overview. That screenshot there is showing you what a pivot grid in PeopleSoft looks like. You can show or hide that chart that's in the middle there. You can also change how that chart appears, whether it's a bar, line, pie graph. And then to your left-hand side, you're going to see all of your prompts and facets. So this is a way for you to further drill down on the information that you're looking at to really get a good slice of maybe a really specific function or unit of this table. And then finally, down in that middle section below that chart, you have all of your individual results. So again, if you further filter in on that graph or using the prompts and facets, the results that meet that criteria will then show down below for you in that line kind of order, where you can take additional action and maybe see a little bit more information than what we're showing you on the graph. So in People Tools, classic pivot grids first came out in 8.5.2 and fluids are available in 8.5.4. If you want to go to the next page, Paul, just to kind of give you a little bit an idea of the scope that we were working with. So we were tasked to create a dashboard to have a global view of all of these forms. So you can see just in this screenshot here, we are showing you the graph and we're showing you the form types on that horizontal line. So you can see that there's 6 different form types that we are showing. And a form type is like a hire form, or you can see they do job changes. So we wanted to be able to graphically show how much of each form type was out there in a pending status. And then up the y-axis or that vertical line, you have the number of forms. So you can see by this graph, there is a large chunk of hire forms that were currently pending. So to be able to graphically show that lets everyone kind of know where the attention might need to go to get those hire forms fully approved. And then again, on the left-hand side, you can see there's some ways to filter out some data. Really nail down maybe a specific population that you're trying to work for, excuse me, or a specific department. Those are all kind of filters that you can use there. And then down below, we would have the full results within that section, so you can see those more.
You can see that one of those that might be really helpful in this situation is that originated age group. That's not saying how old the form user is. That's saying how long that form has been there. So if you were to click on that, you could narrow the graph down to only show you the forms that are more than 15 days old.
Definitely. And yeah, that's definitely a way to use this. That way you know these are what has been out there for a long time. These are the ones we probably should get moving on, or they need some additional follow-up. And we'll show you a couple of tools that we created to help you use that. So when we have this slide deck distributed, on the next slide is our full video that kind of walks through this solution. We'll play you little bits and pieces of it and just kind of talk you through what you're seeing. That way, if you go back and watch the full one, you'll have a little bit more context. There is also audio on this video too that will kind of turn down so you don't hear me twice, but that's available as well.
Get that audio turned down.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. And then you want to just skip ahead just a little bit, Paul, through like this intro section. This is just a picture of how it fully came out, so you can see the results kind of down below. And then as it keeps going a little bit further, you'll see we put this on a tile, so that way users can just launch directly into this. The goal was kind of to be able to give this to not only submitters of this form, so they could see what they've submitted and kind of where it's at in the process, but also those larger departments like your central payroll, like your central offices that need a more larger oversight into what's currently out there and in flight. So you can see kind of on this screen, I'm drilling down a little bit. I'm continuing to filter out my options so I can see more of a subset of this data. And then highlighting those dates as Paul had mentioned, so you can kind of see how long things have been sitting out. since they were first submitted, and then also since the last person has taken an action on this form. And where we have it paused right now is some related actions. So using the related content service through PeopleSoft, we can add actions to take on these individual forms directly through this tool. So users don't have to navigate to another page or kind of have that side-by-side view that I'm sure most of you work with right now to be able to not only review data, but then also compare it. So we were able to hook up a few of the GT features that we deliver within our framework, like the GT admin tool, and then also links to open up this form and actually view it. Oh, no problem. And then we've also put in some tools to kind of help administer the form. So links to email users, whether it's the current user of where this form is currently pending, or maybe the initiator. So this is a way that we can do that outside of a workflow. So that's what's being shown here. And then the very last thing is a admin notes section. With our GT eForms framework, you're able to make comments at the end of a form, but those comments are available to anyone who has access to opening that form. So this admin notes modal window here was a way for us to have administrators talk back and forth to each other and update each other on the status of the form or maybe what was outstanding without it being saved on the form forever and in the history of it. So that's just a quick overview of this solution so you can kind of see it. But again, the full video will be available within this deck for you to go back and view it later. And then these next couple of slides just kind of walk through our steps to create the pivot grid. So first, some things that you want to consider of how you're going to get the data. And then for this solution, we did have a technical resource create us a view. And that's because you're going to need a query in order to, or one of the ways you can use pivot grids is by using a query. And we don't want to have joins within that query that you create. So we had a resource create us a view. So that way we can merge all of these different tables that we wanted to be representative in that results section down below. Into a single view that we could then use in the query. So that will be one of the steps.
Pivot grids doesn't like queries that have joins.
Yes. Yep. So we did that all technically in a view. And then once you have the view, then you can go in and do things like changing the label on the fields, adding prompts to the query. That does work if you build that directly into query. Opposed to using the pivot grid wizard. And then PeopleSoft has a really great 5-step wizard to walk you through the creation of this pivot grid, where you'll configure your prompts, set your accesses, and then review your display options. And then if you go to the next slide, it'll allow you to publish it. And then you can further take that a step further and put in some related content. So again, those links out to other sources that you want to be able to view without actually having the user switch their screens or go to a new tab. So you can open it in a new window or use a modal window, which will come just right up in the middle of that screen. And then the next couple of slides here just kind of walk you through the pivot grid related actions. Here's some resources within our GT eForms framework. And then the next couple of slides just walk you through defining that related content and then actually hooking that related content up to a pivot grid. And then
that way, the data that is on the row in the pivot grid becomes the source for where you're navigating to. Like you can pre-populate that email with information from that form, or you can pre-populate that note window with data from that particular form that you're making a note on. It's related actions that allow you to tie that together and define data that you're going to be passing into the related source.
Yes.
Okay.
And then finally, just some considerations and some additional references for you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Kristen. Appreciate it. let's see. Let me just address, let's address the questions. We'll borrow a little bit of time from the end. Can a pivot grid be built on a materialized view? Yes, that should work just fine. Materialized view is basically just a table that has been an actual table that is built and updated based on the query result. So yes, you can do that. Let's see, and looking at a question, since this one also gets into Kibana, I'll go ahead and hold off on that question until a little bit later, if that's okay. We'll get back to that. That one is to me specifically, so someone else can see it. I will get it, Derek. I will get back to that one. Thank you. Okay, so simplified analytics is another term that you'll see thrown around. And basically this is an evolution, part of the evolution of pivot grid technology inside of PeopleSoft. So pivot grids first showed up in 8.5.2. They were the classic pivot grid solution. And basically you could only, they used PS query, they published as pagelets, as classic pagelets, and gave you some visualization options. Starting in 8.5.4, you got a fluid version of pivot grids, and that made them available in all form factors. You could use them on fluid components, and you could also use real-time data. There are a number of upgrades that you get in order to when you go to the fluid pivot grid. And then simplified analytics is really, again, kind of an evolution of pivot grids. They don't replace pivot grids, they rather implement pivot grids and add some wizard type guidance on top of pivot grids to make it easier to deploy simplified analytics inside of the, or along with your components, and allows you to also stick reports on home pages, to put some contextual reports in with transaction pages, so you can have some little graphs show up on the side of your component that give you information that you might want to see handy while you're working in that component. This is an Oracle slide that kind of shows how how features have been added to the pivot grid tool over time. And again, Oracle continues to invest in visualization technologies. Pivot grids are among them, but again, part of the reason we're going over this is so that you can have an idea of how the different tools compare and where you can use them. So simplified analytics is basically a tool that lets you customize how analytics get displayed. You get a process that really takes a pivot grid in most situations, and then helps you to display that pivot grid in specific places, like on home pages, in a dash bar, or in a pane that is specifically created in order to display simplified analytics, called the Unified Related Content Analytic pane. And if that does not sound like a simple thing, I'm sorry, I did not name it. The skill set you need, this is functional. Basically, if you've got the pivot grid to start with, this is a PIA-based configuration to deploy pivot grids as a simplified analytic. It became available in 8.5.5, and then you had new deployment options that came out in 8.5.7. So what you need is the Create Analytics Wizard, which we'll give you a look at. You have some simple steps there, and then after you have stepped through the wizard, then you can publish it for other users. It takes an administrator to do that. So this is what it ends up looking like. These are some you can see that unified analytic pane there on the right of this screenshot. This is showing the My Team application in HCM, and there are a number of analytics that are delivered along with that so that you can get an idea of related information for your team. And you'll see you can actually add in additional analytics as you, if you build more of them, you can add them to this target component. To create analytics, again, this is just the first step of that wizard. You'll see that there are a number of sources you can use, but the one you will mostly use is a pivot grid. You'll already have a pivot grid defined, and then it will leverage that and really just give you a simplified way to deploy that into cool places in your application. So here's a bunch of resource material for when you download the slide so that you can drill in and find ways to use simplified analytics. Okay, so next one is kind of a big shift from functional to technical. Oracle JET is another visualization option that, just in case, there's no chance I will forget, but just in case I forget, all the credit for this one goes to Jim Marion over at JSM Pros. A great guy. You should go to his sessions. And I stole most of this directly from him with his permission, and now with attribution. But Oracle JET is a library of JavaScript implementations, and it comes pre-installed in PeopleSoft PUMS and can be updated by itself. But that library includes all sorts of things. But among those are visualization templates, like the ones you see on the right here. The skill set that you need is heavily technical, and then there's some PIA-based configuration on top. You'll end up writing JavaScript, you'll use people code, SQL, HTML objects, iScripts, all kinds of the cool stuff. So techies, this is the stuff you want to talk your manager into letting you do because it's fun and exciting. So this OJET versions are incremented with each PeopleTools release. And the Oracle JET Cookbook, which basically is a visualized library of what's in OJET, that starts to become the version of OJET that supports the cookbook was deployed with 8.5.7. However, you can update those libraries without updating PeopleTools. So this is one where if you want more recent stuff, you can actually get in and update your OJET version without having to update PeopleTools. And that is, if you want to see, well, what version am I on? Go on your web server and drill to that location. Don't do it right now, though, because you should be paying attention to my session. Okay, so the Oracle JET Cookbook looks like this, and you'll see there are a lot of different categories over here. We're looking at the visualizations. And so basically, any of these types of visualizations you could implement inside of PeopleSoft. This timeline is the one that we're going to walk through. We're going to walk through an HCM example where a timeline could make a great visualization of some PeopleSoft data. So, and specifically, we're going to build a timeline like this for job data to be able to see, well, what happened when for a particular employee as they went through various transactions or as various things happened to them during an employment process. So this is, I am not going to run through all of this. Again, this is your documentation when you decide to try this for yourself, but you're going to run through creating an iScript that's going to actually host the content. You're going to be building objects that will pass data into a JET object. and you're going to be pulling in the JavaScript objects into branding, and you're going to be building various app designer objects to allow you to pull information together to display that information in an HTML area, and then you'll use related content to actually deploy it where you want it to show up. So you've got JavaScript, you've got iScript, people code, and you've got related content definitions in order to deploy that. That ends up, and I'm probably going to be skipping ahead a little bit here, but ends up being able to drill in. Here we've actually deployed this. Instead of in job data, this is showing you our application of this in an eForm setting. So we're going to look through and see all of the eForms that a particular employee have had submitted. So here we can drill into related action to see the actions that you could take on this employee inside of our personnel action form product, or you can hit, oh, let's look at their timeline of the personnel actions they've already had. And I can scroll in or out and look and see, oh, okay, I can see when they were hired, they had some job changes, status change was the last one that they saw. So you get this great scrollable visualization that lets you see what's happening and where. And again, all that's done. That was done in the course of a few hours, leaning heavily again on Jim Marion's notes, which you'll find out on his blog, and on the OJET library. Okay, so OJET is this great additional thing that you didn't know you had, but it is there, and it's fun to look at, fun to play with, and there's more power there than we'll ever have time to dig into. So a couple of good YouTube videos from Jim over at JSM Pros to get you down to the bottom of Oracle JET. Okay, so let's get into Kibana. Kibana, what is it? This is basically a performance-friendly visualizer for PeopleSoft app data, and it is part of the ELK stack. So basically, Elasticsearch is the index that now is delivered with PeopleSoft and is the preferred way to navigate inside of modern PeopleSoft-based applications. All of that data that is very quickly, and it's deployable with really high performance because there's separate indexes that are built outside of traditional PeopleSoft data tables, and that data then becomes the source information for these visualizations. So the skill sets that you need: first, you've got to be able to have the data that you're going to use in an Elasticsearch index. So you need a resource who can help with, who's familiar with Elasticsearch indexing, to get your data in there if it isn't already in an index. You also have a PeopleSoft user with a search administrator role that can import these dashboards into PeopleSoft, and after that, it's primarily functional, and it's helpful to actually know some PS query. Kibana really becomes available, at least in terms of configurable and extensible reports, with 858. And there are some delivered visualizations that you can deploy immediately if you're on Tools 858, and you can also build your own. So the overall steps, how to get in there, what you're going to be looking at to get Kibana available. You're going to install it, connect it to your Elasticsearch server, start it as a service, and then and then you have these config steps to actually create a visualization. Again, I won't walk through all of this, but it'll be there for you when you go try this out. So here is a quick walkthrough. You'll see that inside of here we've got deployed on a tile on a home page, on a Fluid home page. You can actually see information inside that tile that's coming from Kibana. And as you drill in, you can end up in a Kibana visualizer that you launch from inside of PeopleSoft, but the visualizer is a separate window that's actually going to be displaying your Kibana information. And then you have a separate layer of search authorization of security that gets added with Kibana as well. And basically, Kibana and Elasticsearch are communicating with people tools in order to maintain near real-time indexes or scheduled update indexes to present the search engine that you're going to be using for your Elasticsearch-based searches inside of PeopleSoft. That same data gets used to actually provide those visualizations and analytics. And then Kibana also has this security plugin that lets you integrate with PeopleSoft and secure the data appropriately. But you're really accessing all of that through the PeopleSoft Internet Architecture. So you have Kibana dashboards that can be deployed either on a home page. They can also be deployed in related information windows, much like Simplified Analytics, but you have many, many, many more visualization options. And that's, again, where creativity comes at the premium of figuring out, well, what are we going to do? How can we visualize this data in a way that's helpful? This is a delivered dashboard that shows metrics for, and this is really where Kibana started, was in visualizing log information that the Elk stack produces. So getting into metrics and saying, okay, well, how is our backwoods deep Jedi indexing process going? And we can see some visualizations of that. They ended up building visualizations that are so powerful that, hey, let's use that in other places. But again, to begin with, a lot of the delivered visualizations were log and performance-based visualizations. But again, you get a lot of flexibility and a lot of speed when you use delivered Kibana, or if you build your own Kibana reports. And again, really pretty visualizations that can, this is a favorite of mine, just love these creative visualizations to be able to give you a good view of what's happening all at once. Okay, so a few more examples of what you can do here. Here we've got the heat maps. You can do geospatial visualizations really readily, and gauges. You've got all sorts of your typical bar charts and pie charts and such forth, but really amazing ways to visualize information. Geospatial, you can always be thinking about, all right, well, where are my invoices coming from? Where are my customers? Where are my employees right now? Where are their hometowns? How does that change over time? All sorts of ways that you can get actionable information out of your PeopleSoft system. Okay, so just a few quick considerations about all of these. How do you pick which tool to use? This is, again, an Oracle slide that shows you some of the overlap between Kibana and pivot grids. And you'll see where Kibana really outshines pivot grids are in having a large visualization library, the ability to track changes over time, handle large volumes. Speed is the biggest thing, because this is pulling data, again, out of optimized indexes that are outside of PeopleSoft on separate servers. So using them isn't going to be slowing down your production PeopleSoft system like some of these real-time pivot grids might if they're hitting the tables really hard. And so you don't get any online impact while you're using the Kibana information. And pivot grids shine in the sense that it's a lot easier to make them contextual to a transaction, like Kristen was showing with our eForms transactions. You can add thresholds and notifications so you can hook in better with other PeopleSoft tools. It's real time, whereas Kibana it can be near real time, but pivot grids are actually going off of real time data. And more easy to hook into related actions and to use as a basis for simplified analytics. Both of them, and we should add Oracle JET as well, can be used embedded in dashboards and related content, can follow PeopleSoft security, and really can add a minimal cost to deploy them. Okay, and I know I did not dig a ton into Kibana for you there, so here's your homework, and have fun. There's a lot that can be done there. Sorry, what was that, Scott?
I'm sorry. I was just wondering, I may have missed it. Did you respond to that question that had been posted about filters, adding filters to the Kibana?
I have not. Let me go ahead and respond to that now. So, see how to add filters that are not already defaulted in the Kibana dashboard and make them part of the dashboard across the user. Example, workforce equity dashboard, and HCM pulls all the employees. How do you add a filter and make it default to not pull employees of a particular pay group or business unit? That is a great question, Derek, and I think it's detailed enough that let's explore that offline. If you will get in touch with us at our booth, we can dig into that example and see if we can get you an answer. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm just going to spend a couple of quick minutes and then we'll get to questions. The visualizations, where do you, there's some other proper nouns that show up when you talk about visualizations, about the tools that you have available. They can confuse the list of, hey, is this another visualization option? Is a fluid dashboard another visualization option? But really, all of these are navigation options or ways to reach or to host the options that we've already talked about. So just flipping through these quickly, fluid dashboards are a way to present this content, and instead of being made up of pagelets like a classic dashboard, they're made up of tiles. So they're more like closer to a fluid homepage than they are to a classic dashboard. And they can help keep your home pages from becoming too cluttered by adding another level of nesting. So you can drill from a home page down into a dashboard. This is functional PIA-based configuration to set it up. It started in 855 and then added contextual options in 856. That requires some tech to be able to pass the context information into a fluid dashboard, and it's not supported on the small form factor yet. So, and I will not drill in here, but here's the navigation for how to set up a fluid dashboard. Okay, and that lets you end up with from a home page, being able to drill down into one of these tiles to, like for Workforce Insight, let's see, where is that tile here? Anyway, you click one of these and you end up seeing this fluid dashboard that can summarize multiple, this is going to be a deployment of multiple pivot grids that lets you get an at-a-glance look at your workforce. Okay, and there is your link to lots of homework for fluid dashboards. So a quick comparison then of how this kind of works. I've got an axis here for complexity to implement and feature robustness. Okay, and so simplified analytics is down here, pretty simple and fairly restricted in terms of features. Kibana is way up here. It's more complex to implement, but really robust. And in pivot grids in here somewhere, Oracle JET's farther up. The complexity scale gives you a lot more features as well. And with that, we'll turn it over to, got a few minutes left for question and answer. So shouldn't be too hard for you to stump us. Give us a shot. Any questions you have about visualization in PeopleSoft?
And Paul, in case we are slow on getting questions in, you've got a couple more slides following this if you wanted to use those as filler.
I will give just a second while we wait, but that is a great idea. So while we watch for those questions, let me just
there's a question.
Ahead. Sorry?
There's a question. Can you combine Kibana analytics and pivot grids accessed from one dashboard?
Can they be accessed from one dashboard? I believe that you can have Kibana boiled in there because you can get Kibana visualizations in a grouplet. So yes, I think you can mix and match Kibana visualizations, at least the thumbnail with pivot grid stuff on the same fluid dashboard.
Very good. We got another question from Mildred. You mentioned near real time. Can you please clarify?
Sure. The data from Kibana comes from the ELK stack, comes from Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is constant, well, depends on how you set up your refresh for your search indexes. The Oracle keeps adding features as you get closer to current. There are more options for real-time or for near real-time updates of those indexes. But so it depends on how you configure them, but the search indexes can be updated overnight, so they could be a day old, or even if you're using, even if you're updating them as you go, even if you have it set to be refreshing constantly, there's still a possibility that the data has not yet refreshed when you run a report. So there may be a higher, if you're looking to see a visualization of transaction counts, that transaction count, even if the indexes are being updated real time, they may not have been, the refresh may not be done before you run the report. So pivot grids run from PeopleSoft tables. Kibana runs from Elasticsearch indexes, and so it's dependent on how fast those Elasticsearch indexes are updated. It could be anywhere from just a few seconds behind or a split seconds behind to being hours behind, depending on the refresh that you configure for those indexes. Okay, let's see.
Oh, here's another one. Is there anyone refreshing near real time now? How much resource?
I don't have information on implementation for those changes. So and I don't. I'm sorry, I don't know a client that's doing that. I'll just say that it should be a lot easier to try in a cloud-based environment where you have a lot more flexibility in terms of assigning resources to those. But if anybody who's in the session wants to comment on that, if any of you have used, if any of you are doing aggressive refreshes of your Elasticsearch indexes, I would love to hear your experience. You can throw it in the comments. Okay.
That's it for now.
Sorry?
I said that's it for now.
Okay, very good. In the meantime, you get some a shameless plug of JET eForms, the source material for Kristen's pivot grids that she was discussing. So JET eForms is a PeopleSoft specific toolkit to be able to build electronic forms and self-service applications that can extend your PeopleSoft application to other constituencies, to outside users, or can help to facilitate and simplify transactions inside of PeopleSoft. It is a bolt-on to PeopleSoft, so it installs inside your PeopleSoft database, doesn't require any external servers. We've been able to accomplish huge results by replacing kind of, if you think about the business processes that start outside of PeopleSoft and flow in, whether that's in emails or PDFs or even, heaven forbid, paper. If it starts outside of PeopleSoft and goes into PeopleSoft, it's a great possibility to replace that process, add in error checking, add in design that allows the form and the process to unfold naturally to the user, add in tracking and security, to add in the ability to log electronic signatures, and you've got JET eForms. So let's see, Scott mentioned that the PowerPoint for the session has now been uploaded to the conference site, so go take a look. Just a few places where we've done some awesome eForms stuff. Again, all of these eForms transactions produce data that you may end up wanting to visualize for in Kibana or Pivot Grids or Oracle JET. I'll just point out this one here at Princeton, where the pandemic created a need for them to immediately launch 2 student eForms to find out where their students were, so to be able to know if they were sheltering on campus or if they were headed home. And we went from design to production of the student-facing self-service application in less than 24 hours. They came up with the idea on Thursday. Students were using it on Friday. If you add visualization on the top of that, you could build a pivot grid that would look at that data, since it's inside of PeopleSoft, and show here is the percentage of students that we have sheltering on campus, the percentage that are off campus, and the percentage that have not yet responded. So easy to deploy visualizations when you have that information inside of PeopleSoft instead of in external systems. So again, lots of ways to pull heavy-duty functionality into those forms that lets you do conditional routing and email notifications, build conditional logic to only show the fields you want to your users, related displays to give them the information you want. Actually, you can display visualizations like what we just showed, and being really able to control what data they can enter with restricted valid value prompts, automatically pre-populate the form and add intelligent defaulting. Lots of power in GT eForms. Learn more about it at our booth.